were they installed? Yeah, so you can see that they actually did the install of the VM in 2016, and we did an update. And then we weren't able to install Cortex XDR Agent 7.9 or above unless we installed Windows updates to allow for the Azure code signing service, signed code to be verified. So we did a Windows update on the VMs here. And yeah, so here the KB's installed. And we can also see the installed applications. We don't have CVEs for the applications for Windows, but we do have for Linux. And the other thing we provide you as well as part of Host Insights is also host inventory. And you saw a bit of this through when we were looking at the IP address view, and we were asking it to provide us insights based on disks, for example. We can do that for Mac, Windows, and Linux. So here we've inventoried the disks on our assets. Yeah, their file systems, their space, their size, their free space, the drivers, the applications installed. Yeah, the shares they're providing, services on Windows. Again, all part of Host Insights. You find that this is so here we're in host inventory. Yeah, to see the additional host insight information. And then we were back on the vulnerability assessment to get there. Yeah, another way. All right, so I'll catch up on some slides. Please do ask questions if you like. Again, we are not able to patch the vulnerability for you within Cortex XDR. Many people ask. This is not our vulnerability management system. We're providing you with vulnerability assessment. Okay, so that's where you find it under assets. Vulnerability assessment. I showed you the requirement for it. And also for host inventory as well, is that we have XDR Pro endpoint capabilities enabled and the default to also use Host Insights. And we have the Host Insights add-on. So when you go into vulnerability assessment, you can recalculate your CVE list and affected endpoints whenever you like. If you find the calculation is not current, but it should be. We're showing you by default from the perspective of the CVEs, each CVE, what their severities are, the score, how many affected endpoints, and which are the affected endpoints. If you want to look at it from the perspective of the endpoints, you can export all this detail as well, provide to your Windows admins. So we need to patch these CVEs, yeah. You click on the endpoints button. We see it from the perspective of our endpoints. Again, the new exclamation mark indicates an unsupported OS. And for this endpoint, what CVEs is it vulnerable to, exposed to? And can click to, again, see the list from the perspective of that endpoint. All right, the other option we have from the endpoint actions, we can isolate if we need to, rerun the insights collection just for that endpoint, or view the installed KBs, view the installed applications. All right, short and sweet. If you have questions about vulnerability assessment, let me know. Otherwise, that module we went through understanding the different Cortex XDR network asset types, managed versus unmanaged. For even unmanaged assets, we can discover many of them through many different methods, broker VM, through taking in cloud audit logs from your cloud providers, from the XDR agents ARP cache, using Windows DHCP collector, many methods. We also looked at how to use the IP address view, that advanced investigative view, so we could view the incoming and outgoing network connections and some insights graphically, how to define IP address ranges and domains, but the ranges we use, even if you don't want to scan with Network Mapper on Broker, you configure the range so we can apply that network range next to the asset. We can show you which network it's attached to. I talked about the different discovery methods and the requirement for Host Insights to be able to identify CVEs in your internal network. Yeah, for Windows kernel and for Linux kernel applications. All right, nice lab for this. I'll give you plenty of time for the lab. We only have two short modules left. Yeah. So it is the last part of the class. I know some people are tired from Monday morning already. For those of you that were new to start this training yesterday, not with me since Monday, you will need to perform activity 7.1 to activate and register your broker VM. For those like me that are already activated and registered, I hope your broker VM is still there. If it is, you'll be able to perform activity 7.2. If you can't configure the network mapper on your broker VM like I couldn't, it's okay. Just make sure you understand the steps and then go on to the more important activity 7.3. Let me know when you're done. Otherwise, I will probably time you out in about half an hour. Yeah, at about 2:30, most likely. Yeah, and we'll then start looking at XQL. 2:30, 2:40. Let me know. I'll keep an eye on the progress. I'll be quiet for you. Call out if you need help anywhere. Yeah, but especially again, like Gary and Arnold, not Gary, Arnold's, who else was new? Sean. Yeah. So those of you that need to activate and register your broker VM, 7.1. The rest of you start with 7.2. Okay, there are people coming towards the end of that lab, so still allow time for others to finish. Have a short tea break or coffee or walk. I will start the next module on XQL in 20 minutes. Again, not a long one, and a short lab for it, and then one last module at the end. All right, so call out anytime if you need before then. Oh, and also while I have you here, I have just marked your attendance. Yeah, you can see I've marked your attendance on Beacon for our event. Yeah, so you should be able to log into Beacon and complete the survey, as well as obtain your course attendance certificate. I'll talk to you a bit about Beacon this afternoon. After the last module, we'll talk about how to find the resources you want for PCDRA exam preparation. Yeah, so I'll remind you about that too, but I've already done that part, so you can complete your survey and get your certificate if you want in the meanwhile. Okay. Well, I'll see you in 20 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is our second last module. It's a bit dry, but it's going to give you extra power. Yeah, it's a short introduction to SQL, the XDR query language. We're going to go through the search basics, how you build a basic query, understand the different stages that are used with SQL, the stages of the basic building blocks for an SQL query, understanding the use of different functions, and how to visualize the result set in different ways, in table format, in graphical format, things like that. So by the end of this module, you'll be able to understand SQL syntax basics, understand what are our basic SQL stages and functions, how to create and run a query. You know, we'll already find query results in the query center. You'll also know how to use different visualization options for the result set. Again, table formats, different types of graphical formats, even in JSON if you wanted to, or advanced view. So before I begin the module, I just want to remind you that with Cortex XDR, we do present you with very simple to find in the web UI. We show you your alerts in the alerts table and certainly as part of an incident. Yeah. So we've already learned quite a bit about alerts and incidents. And we also see with some alerts they are stitched. They include log data that is relevant for that alert. Yeah. But what we don't show you in the XDR management console is a logs table. Remember that our pro agents, every 5 minutes, they send their logs, their EED upload. Yeah. Maybe you want to query through those logs ourselves, or maybe it's one of our traffic logs from one of our firewalls we'd like to query, or from Okta, an authentication log event. So we don't show you a log table. There's nowhere I can see in the management console. What we do give you is we give you the query builder. So you can go about building your own query using SQL. So you can search through the logs. Yeah. All right, so here we are with the SQL editor, and we'll go through, I'll give you some demos as we progress. Let's first of all go through SQL search basics, the different components of an SQL query. To begin with an SQL query, we use stages. The stages are the basic building blocks of the query. These are example stages, data set fields, filters. We'll discuss how they work. And the stages are used to evaluate the query. So here we can see an example of a query using multiple stages. Now, when we use multiple stages, the reason why we call them stages is because when the query is run, we process stage 1, pipe, the delimiter, followed by stage 2. And then pipe is used as the delimiter before we then run the next stage. Okay, so they're examples of stages. Then we have functions. So functions, for example, here we have a function called extract time and another function called current time. So yeah, current time is the actual timestamp of a log entry. And here we're using the extract time function to extract from the current time just the hour. We don't want the minute, second, day, month, year. So these are called functions. And then we also have operators. So in is an example of an operator. Action local port to include from this port to the last port, start to the end port range. All right, so just understand we use stages, we use functions, and we use operators in an SQL query. And the XDR management console you saw provides when we try to build a query using the query builder, the top option is to do it using SQL, or the bottom options using a form. The form, as we know, are simpler ways of doing the query for our logs, but they don't give us all the attributes to search on. Yeah. So we have our SQL query editor. When you do go into the editor, it will generate for you a query name. You can change it if you want. Yeah. And then in the editor itself, you build the query. And if the query syntax is valid, that's when you have the run button. We're not trying to pick apart the query now, just understand what we're seeing. Yeah. If the syntax is invalid, it'll show you where the syntax is invalid and you won't have the run options. This query has already been run and we see the query results in the results table down the bottom. We're looking at it in table format, not in graphical format, or not in the advanced view. There are other tabs we can interact with. So here we would have the query results for a run query. So when we use a stage, for example, operator's missing equals, and it's got a syntax checker and autocomplete. So dataset, which dataset would I like to run my query against? The dataset that our agents send their alerts and logs to is called XDR_data. So far, that syntax is valid. I could run the query, but that would say, show me all of the logs in the last 24 hours with no filter. So I wouldn't run that query. I've made the mistake of doing that before. So if I'd like to do a further filter and run another stage, we then use the pipe. Yeah. So I can use the pipe and then say, let's filter that query with a filter stage. Yeah. So far, there's a syntax error, but with a filter stage and it's auto-suggesting, I can then specify what I like to filter on. And there are many criteria we can filter on, but I'll filter based on my agent_host name if I can find it, or keep on typing agent_host name. That's a valid filter option. I can use an operator, yeah, like equals, and then choose my, who am I this week? 6718-win.1. And again, if there's no syntax errors, that should be okay to run. It'll only look for all the logs in the last 24 hours from my endpoint. It's still going to be a lot of log data. Yeah. So I'm going to do a further filter before I'm confident enough to run this. I don't want to filter all of the events that have been logged from my endpoint. So I'll do a further filter to filter the output, the results table, the results set, based on what did we do before with Notepad, for example? So actor, and you have to start to learn the syntax. But as we've seen through the web UI before, you might recognize actor process image, for example, actor process image name, and we're going to contain something like Notepad. Yeah, so I don't have to do the whole thing, don't have to make it equal. So that's again a valid query, or otherwise I wouldn't be able to run it. So let's run that now. We should see the query results down in the result table down the bottom. I can save it as my query. So I can save it into the query library. I can schedule the query as well, yeah? So this is in the last, search the logs for the last 24 hours only, yeah? Let's run. It's running. And then we could further filter the results by further refining the query and then rerunning the query again. That's what I'll show you how to do. Yeah. Just want to show, for those of you that haven't seen an SQL basic query, what does a basic query look like, and the use of the, syntax checking, things like that. And here we've now found 132 results, yeah, matching my host name and Notepad in the last 24 hours. So here we have the query results in tabular format. And if I missed it, sorry, I'm trying to find the scroll bar. There it is, and scroll across. So we can see the agent host name. You can filter based on values like that, yeah, which is what I did. I didn't filter based on the agent_IP address or the actor effective username, but these are all things we can search for, yeah? But that's what I filtered on. Actor process image name contains Notepad. We then see the path. We then see the command lines that were used. My hello.txt's, the most recent ones. Yeah. All hello.txt's. And what were these? What was initiated by? What was the command line that was used? So there are many different attributes shown in the query results. Maybe I don't need to know what's the causality actor process image SHA-256. I'm not interested in including this in my result set because maybe I'd like to export this later as well, yeah? You can export the results if you like. Unfortunately, not to CSV. Some people ask me, can you export to CSV? I think it exports to a TSV, not a CSV. Yeah, there is a converter, but it's a TSV, not a CSV. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll continue that discussion, but you've seen what a basic query looks like, what the results look like, and by default, I haven't chosen to filter the results set based on any specific columns. Maybe I don't want to include all the columns. So we'll look at how to do that afterwards. And notice that with all of these columns, agent_IP address will find search fields on the left-hand side that match those columns. And if I click on one, it shows us a graphical representation of that value. In this case, the causality actor process ID, the value was, the count was, and the percentage was 100. Probably not the best example. Actor process image, SHA-256 will be the same, SHA-256 for all 132 counts. So this shows us another graphical way of analyzing the result set. Yeah. And again, some of these are included by default, the search fields, and some you may not want at all. So we'll look at how to refine and get rid of some of those. Okay. So that's my brief introduction, just to give you something to picture, yeah? Besides that, in the bottom tabs here, we have the SQL helper. You'd like to get some help learning SQL. We have the query library, so you can then use queries from the library, save your own queries into the library. And we have the schema. So I'll show you that too. So here, for example, I'm running a query against the XDR_data dataset. Yeah, there are different datasets, and each dataset has a different schema. The datasets provide not just the storage, but also definition of the field names and the field types that we can store within the Cortex data lake for that dataset. So the dataset that we use for a Cisco firewall that sends syslogs through the syslog collector has a different name and a different schema. Yeah, the Okta dataset will have a different name and a different schema. So we can see what fields can we query for in the XDR dataset through the schema. So run interactively, run in the background, or save as schedule. Pretty straightforward options. As we've seen already, there is automatic color coding within the SQL query editor. So I'll do this briefly, but the stages are color-coded green automatically. You saw me use the dataset stage, the filter stage. We have an alter stage, the basic building blocks. They're automatically color-coded green. Our functions are color-coded purple. We perform auto-completion. I start typing data, and it gives me suggestions, data set, for example, and then suggestions for the operator. And then if we keep on, going to the next space there, the suggestion on which data set would you like to run your query against. So we're providing you auto suggestion and completion, not competition. Let's fix that. It's a new slide deck. We have a new slide deck with a new version of the course. Sometimes we have to proofread on the fly. Yeah. So we're not talking about competition, we're talking about completion. Completion. Yeah, that looks better, right? Autocomplete, auto-completion. And we highlight for you where there's a syntax error. No error on line 1, no error on line 2, and then there is on line 3, big red mark, and we show you where it started. Straight from here. Fields X is not a valid stage. We put one character too many, so the whole line is invalid. Now, the other basics for SQL is that line breaks are discarded. So here is a query similar to the one I created. I like to do a carriage return and enter at the end of my stage and their function, yeah? So I like to do a carriage return, then use the pipe, start the next stage, then use again, enter, and then a pipe. So this is exactly the same in syntax as this query. If you compare them, we just didn't press carriage return. Yeah, so dataset equals XDR_data, and then pipe, the next stage, then pipe, the next stage. It's exactly the same query, but this is easier to read, yeah? So I, as a preference, and when I'm doing demonstrations in class, yeah, we'll do it with carriage return, but they're optional because they are discarded. I'm going to dwell on that. Okay, also, sometimes you want to put a comment in your query. It's good practice. There are 2 types of comments that we have that will be disregarded by the query compiler when you do the run of the query. So if you want a line comment, you do // and then from that stage onwards, you could have a valid command here first, but from that stage onwards, the rest of the line will be disregarded. If you want to put a block comment, multiple lines, we start it with /*, then however many lines you like, a block comment, and the end delimiter will be the opposite order, */. So here they show you a query that includes a line comment after the dataset stage. After the filter stage, we put in there a block comment before the field stage. Right, this is the one module I might put you to sleep on. No, I won't, but it's a bit dry compared, yeah? So case sensitivity, the next basic before we start looking at how to build a query. Case sensitivity. The good news is our keywords, like the stage and the functions, they're not case sensitive. These are exactly the same. Upper or lowercase use of filter, actor, process, image name, all lowercase, or a combination of filter in uppercase and actor, process in uppercase. That's the same. It's case insensitive for our keywords. But the string comparisons, when we do a comparison of a string, yeah, lowercase PowerShell.exe is different from uppercase PowerShell.lowercase.exe. Yeah. So we have to be careful of that because by default, string comparisons are case sensitive. Yeah. So my query would not have matched, for example, if we look back at one of the results where we matched on notepad.exe, that's the real actor process image name. So if I had said contained notepad, that wouldn't have matched, no results. Yeah. So I'll break my query. So we'll use the config stage as the very first stage, and then case_sensitive equals false. It is false. Correct. Didn't, yeah, there we go. Now it auto-suggested for me. And then I'm going to do a pipe at the beginning of the next stage to delimit it properly, and it should fix all the problems. Okay, so the config stage is another stage. If we use it, it must be the very first stage in the query. And I can now do my string comparisons in sensitive. I could have my, win point, or something like that, yeah? And notepad, you can see with different combinations as well. And that would still work. I won't bother running the query though. So again, the string comparisons are case sensitive. You can disable that with config case_sensitive equals false. That must be the first stage if used, the config stage. And then upper and lowercase combinations in the string would match it if it was all upper, all lower, or combinations of. And then again, if your syntax is valid, you'll have your two options to run in the foreground and wait for the query to complete, look at the result set right where you are, or run in the background so you can do something else, and then wait for your notification, and then link to view the query in the query center. You can save your query. The other option you have besides saving it into the query library is you can save your query as a correlation rule. That's the only way we can create correlation rules as an XQL, or you can save it as a BIOC. Or you can schedule, and the same kind of thing as we talked about before, the two types of scheduled queries, whether we do it with a form or with SQL, is a scheduled periodic query, yeah, or a scheduled non-periodic query, one time in the future. And once you run your query, again, you see your results set down the bottom under the Query Results tab in tabular format by default, unless you've included in the query options to display it graphically by default. And we'll look at how to do that too. So every query has a name. You know how to track your query names from the query center as well, assigned automatically, but you can control it before you run. All right, so they're the real basics. Now we're going to start learning about how we build a query. Yeah, the different SQL stages are building blocks. I just need to grab a cup of water from the kitchen. 1 second, please. Excuse me. Okay, I'm back. All right, so SQL stages. Every query consists of at least one, but typically multiple stages. The stages are the ones that we color code green. For example, dataset, filter, dedupe, limit. I think, Kent, you asked before, I think you saw the use of the limit stage to limit the number of results. We don't want 10,000 always, yeah. So again, we're using multiple stages in this example, and each stage performs a different specific operation to evaluate the query. And when we're running the query, we're running stage 1, followed by stage 2, followed by stage 3, where, again, pipe is the delimiter between each. Sometimes the output of one stage becomes the input of another stage. So the stage order does matter as well in some cases, if we need to use the output of one stage as the input for another. All right, so all stages require some parameter. They're never just empty. Yeah, they got some parameter. All right, so the first few important stages, we've already touched on this one, the config stage. You saw me use config to turn our string comparisons to become case insensitive, yeah? So the config stage sets parameters on how the query will be interpreted and executed. It provides compile time parameters for when the query is executed. So like I showed you with forcing case insensitive string comparisons, and we also use the config stage to choose the time frame over which the query will run. Config time frame equals, and then the number, 24 hours, or we can do config time frame between a start and an end time. Yeah. Must be at the very top of the query, the first stage. So that's the easy one, the two uses of it, case underscore sensitive, and to config the time frame. Your time frame selection, if you don't want to be very specific, you'll choose 24 hours or 7 days or 1 month before you run your query. But maybe I only want to look in these 3 hours, a certain 3 hours between, in one day. So that can be useful. All right, the next stage, and typically very high up at the beginning of the query, after the config stage, if you use it, will be the dataset stage, because the dataset stage chooses what dataset we're running the query against. And as I explained a little bit, but we touch on more, there are many datasets available in our Cortex data lake. The dataset that, listen to this one, the dataset that my XDR agents send their alerts and logs to is XDR_data. Palo Alto Networks next generation firewalls also, if we're taking in their logs, they send their logs into the same XDR_data dataset. But everything else uses a different dataset. Yeah, so if I'm taking in logs, like I mentioned, from a third-party firewall or Okta or a cloud provider, they will have their own different dataset names. Oh, sorry, I'm still in remediation suggestions. Yeah, cancel that. So I'm just jumping out here for a second to let you, wrap your head around the concept, to see it graphically, because we're going to talk about this in the last module anyway. So sometimes I jump here a bit earlier. And under our settings, we have our data management and our data set management. And this is where we can see our hot storage license, our hot retention period. Yeah. Our alerts and incident hot retention, and for our pro per gigabyte license as well. Yeah. And we don't have a retention add-on license to allow for cold storage, because we also do support now cold storage. Yeah. So what we do show you here are the different data sets in my Cortex data lake. These are not all system data sets. Some of them are. Some have been data sets created by users. When you do the last lab, you'll export, actually, when you do this lab, you'll export the result to a different data set. Yeah, you can see there's some custom user data set names there. When we talked about correlation rules before, one of the options, if we had a match on the correlation rule, is either generate alert or save the results to a data set. a new or existing data set name. Yeah. So you can take a data set. Yeah. Each data set has a different schema. Yeah. So if we look at the, missed it. So here's XDR data, the icon to represent, this is my default. If this is your, and the defaults are personal, if I want to make this my default data set, I can set that as my default. And then when I use a query, I no longer need to specify the data set stage if this is my default. But I don't want that. I want this to be my default. Ah, what happened there? Yeah. All right, so we show you the different data sets, and new data sets will be created based on the ingestions you're taking in from other providers. New data sets like the Okta data set we don't see here. If we integrated with Okta, we'd have an Okta data set. From the data sets here as well, we can view the schema. Show me the XDR data set, opens up the query builder, just populating for us that stage so we can see the schema automatically. So the dataset lets you specify in which specific dataset or in which datasets would you like to include the query. So you don't need to include the dataset stage to use the defaults. However, XDR_data is the out-of-the-box default dataset. I showed you how you can right-click in dataset management and set a different default. Okay, beside the config and dataset stages, another very important stage is the field stage. So you saw that I wanted to filter my results based on certain fields, like for example, my agent_hostname. I didn't want to look for absolutely everything, and then further refine it with other fields that I chose as well. So fields stage lets you specify the fields to include in the result set. Yeah, you can use multiple fields, and then the field name. You can use an alias, create an alias and give it an alias name. Yeah. So for example, in my query that I ran before, this one over here, sorry, I clicked off there again. I'm just trying to find the slide bar. Okay. So in my query I have run here before, we see, for example, agent_IP address. That's one of the field names that we're showing you by default. Now, I didn't really ask for it, but it's included lots of other results in the result set. Active process image name. Active process image name contains notepad, but you know what? Let's alias that as actor. I'm sorry, I've got a knock on my door. Please give me 1 second. Excuse me. Thank you for your patience. My son forgot his key. Okay, so the field stage again. You are specifying the list of fields to include the columns of your result set. Yeah, you can include multiple fields and you can assign an alias. So here, for example, fields actor process image name. Let's give that an alias of act process. So when we look at the results, it's not going to show us that as the field name. It'll show us a field name of act process, whatever you like. We're just giving it whatever alias you like. We'd also like to include, so comma, all the other fields that start with action_process image name _asterisk, because there are other options. Active process image path, action process, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So you can choose also using wildcards. If there are fields you don't want to include in the result set, they're not useful for you, you do fields then with a minus. So the minus specifies the fields to remove from the results when you run the query. So we don't want to see action process image MD5, comma, or any other field that includes action process image auth underscore SHA. So fields to include, fields to exclude. Because again, you may not want every field, right? Okay. Yeah, remember as you scroll across, there are so many fields, not every one of them is useful for your results for analysis. Besides that, we have the filter stage. So I did a filter of my query based on two criteria. I did it based on my agent host name and based on the actor process image name of Notepad. Yeah. So if the filter stage lets you specify exactly which log records, I'll show you a diagram to help you, put it into perspective. But think of it this way. We have many different event types, for example. Yeah, process, registry, file, network. Maybe I only want to include the results that include a specific event type. Not all the event types from my agent, just the event types that are network or registry or file, matching on specific criteria. So the filter stage lets you select specifically which records to include in the results. So for example, filter, actor process image name equals specifically PowerShell.exe, or include PowerShell.exe and WScript. That's fine too. Or same continuation, include PowerShell or WScript, and we're going to filter it with action uploads less than 10 kilobits per second, so that the upload in kilobits per second, and another filter based on event type process, and it's a process starts. So only show me process starts of these events, not process stops. So let's try and put that in perspective. The two ways you really narrow down on what you're trying to find when you do a query is by using a filter stage or some filter stages and the field stage. So again, think of it this way. The filter, I have many different event types: network, registry, file, process. If I would like to only include in the result set the event types of network, not all the others, we can do a query in the data set, filtered based on my host name, maybe, or host name contains 760 to match on all of us or some of us. And then another filter of event type equals network. Just show us the rows that match on event type of network. Yeah. And then we're using the field stage to then specify the only ones we want to include in the result set is where the event type is action event type and action upload. So these are the fields we'd like to include. And the intersection of your filter stage, what we've matched on with the filter stage and what we match on with the field stage, is what goes to your result set. We still will show you a couple of other values as well, but that's the logic. So we're now seeing some network events, the action upload in kilobits per second. We're still seeing we can't see the processes. We've removed all of that information. Yeah. We've only included these fields. Yeah, action event type and action upload. And we didn't change the alias. So we still see event type. We still see action underscore upload. You could put a different alias name to change the column name. So filter to choose the rows and fields to choose the columns. All right, other important stages. We have an alter stage. Now the alter stage can assign a value to a field, so we can use that in a later stage. So often when we use the alter stage, the order matters. So here's an example. We are using the dataset stage, again, to choose which dataset to run the query against. And then we're using the alter stage to create a variable. And the variable, you can choose whatever the variable name is. we'd like to create a variable called time day. Yeah. And then equal to a function called extract time. And then from underscore time, which is our timestamp, we're using extract time to extract from time. Again, just the day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah. We don't want the hour, minute, second, year, or anything like that from the time. So we're creating a variable called time day, which is going to match just on the day. And we're then going to use the field stage to choose which fields to include in our results. We'd like to include all the fields and the new variable that we call time day. We're then going to use the filter stage to filter the results. We only want to see the time day field, but we only going to include days 1, 5, and 6 of the month. Yeah, the 1st of December, the 5th of December, and the 6th of December. Okay, so we're creating a variable using the alter stage, using the field stage to choose which fields to include, and then the filter stage to further filter the results based on days 1, 5, or 6 of the month. All right, I won't overdo it. There's a comp stage. Comp stage can perform different types of aggregation functions. So we have the ability to do things like average, count, maximums, minimums, sums, different mathematical functions with a comp stage. You may want to combine different values together. Here they're using an example of a comp stage to do some, let's pick it apart one by one. The filter stage to do filters based on event type of network. The fields to include, action upload with an alias of up. So we see that as the result set. This is going to be the columns that we'd like to include with the field stage. Just include action upload, but we'll call it up. Action download will also be a column to display, but we'll alias that as down. Actor process image name, another column we want to see, but alias that as process. And then we're going to use the comp stage. And the comp stage is, creating a sum up as up, sum down as down by process. So what's it doing for us? It's not sorting them because that's not sorted, is it? This is a new one they threw on this one. I should have done that. But yeah, different kinds of mathematical functions. You could even do roundups, convert things like kilobytes per second to megabytes per second in things that show you uploads and downloads activities. Yeah. That's the typical use of the comp stage. And there are lots of others, yeah? We have the limit stage. Kent, you asked about that one before, to limit the number of results. Just show me the top 100, limit 100. A sort stage, so we can sort the results by ascending or descending. If you wanted to sort the results in a given order, we have a sort stage. Deduplication. And the target stage lets you save the result to a different data set. All right, other important considerations. Again, stage order is important, especially when we use, for example, the alter stage. I shouldn't say especially, but the alter stage over here, again, that we saw before, is creating our variable time day to extract the day from the timestamp. And then we're using the field stage after it, and that overwrites the time day variable. And so when we then try to refer to the time day variable afterwards, we're getting a syntax error. Yeah. So the field stage here has overwritten the alter stage. So all we need to do is just change them around. We'll just put the filter stage up here and move we'll reverse the order. Also, as mentioned, the config stage must be the first stage, and target, because you're saving the result to a different target data set, must be the very last stage. Take all the input of all the other stages, and the result is output to the target data set. All right, we're getting there. SQL functions. We have a series of SQL functions as well. So functions apply actions to their arguments. So here we've talked about different stages before. Alter stage, creating a variable, for example. But here are the functions in purple. Extract time, current time, round, divide, split. There are many different functions. Sometimes sometimes people ask me, is this similar to Splunk's query language? I don't use Splunk's query language. Yeah, but it is not similar to Splunk, but there is some translations. If any of you are good with Splunk, we do have some Splunk functions and stages and the resulting SQL to use. I'm not sure if that's helpful for any of you, but I'll share this part. It's pretty much where you do your, SQL in the Pro Administrator Guide, some documentation for you. Might as well share that link through as well. Yeah, some people find that useful when they sit the class. All right. And there are many SQL functions. Don't worry, you don't need to memorize them. Yeah. So for mathematical functions, add, divide, subtract, round, power, different string processing functions to convert a string to lowercase, or do a string count, trim it and replace, array processing functions, different type conversion functions. So it is quite a powerful language, but like with every language, yeah, we have to learn it to become really proficient with it. Yeah, but don't be shy either, because sometimes you'll be doing your own research. You might be on Google, for example. I remember when log4j came out, so we'll try google.com. I remember when log4j was, we first heard about log4j. So log4j threat hunting with Cortex XDR. Almost got it. So Cortex XDR managed threat hunting team creates a few queries. So yeah, I would look at that too, but here's a good official Palo Alto Networks link. What is log4j? Understanding it. How would we hunt for that threat in our environment using Cortex XDR tools, things like that, yeah? So I won't take you through the whole document again, but yeah, it will provide you with, for example, SQL queries that you can use to look for certain threats in your environment, yeah? I'm not going to try and pick apart the whole thing with you, but anyway, you get the idea, yeah? All I did there was do a Google search on threat hunting for a certain threat with Cortex XDR. So it's, and again, I compare this to learning a new language. Often when you start learning that new language, you're a bit shy, yeah, to start practicing with it with people that are fluent. But the people that are fluent understand, they'll help you. And this is part of that help. Kent, can I share that? I can't really share that. How does that help me? Maybe it is, I can share that. I'm not meant to share non-Palo Alto Networks links on an EPT class. Yeah, but it is MITRE.org. I'll have a look at that. And then, yeah, maybe you could send it to everyone, Kent. If you think it's good for everyone, you can send that to everyone. I'm going to look at that myself and save that. Yeah. But yeah, as an instructor for an EPT, I'm only really allowed to send official Palo Alto Networks links, but that's MITRE.org. Great. Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. All right. So there's, again, SQL functions. There are many others. Also, SQL doesn't provide an if statement, but it does have an if function. So you can work out your if condition if required. And the very last part is we have result set visualization options. When you build a query, you can include within the query options to choose how to graphically format and to show you the result in graphical format by default. Not every type of query you want to see graphically, but some you do, yeah? So we're showing you in table format. And the other thing I didn't show you on the query results, I'll quickly just return to for a second, is on the query results, these are results, yeah? I can then interact with them slightly as well and add that active process image path to the malware profile now list. Depends on what the result is. Yeah. All right, so the table format, there's a graphical format, there's an advanced format in terms of the different view options. So table mode is our default mode. You've seen what the tabular format looks like. Yeah, different results in separate rows. The advanced mode shows you something very similar. So if I click on the advanced there, yeah, shows you each result, but all of the result attribute, all of the log attributes shown to you this way instead of having to scroll across. So that might be easier to see sometimes. Now the table, where I have to scroll across and see all the different attributes, yeah? Or I just want to see it in advanced. I can see them all here. For the first result, the second result, yeah. And the graphical, you have to then choose how you'd like to graphically format. So with our graphical format, there are many different graph types. Depends again on the type of query you're doing. Some things you may want to represent, for example, on a world map, when we're dealing with network connections, that doesn't really make sense if you're dealing with, you know, how many processes starting and stopping. Pie charts, columns, area, different options. If you are going to use something like a line chart, you would choose what would you like for the x-axis, what would you like as the y-axis. And again, we can put within the query the settings to configure the chart graphical parameters. So there's our table format, the advanced view format as well. And there's an example of graphical output. We're looking at the active process counts, different active processes, and their counts in percentages. Yeah, so color-coded, this process, 64%, service host, 6.9%, ngen.exe, 25%. The fields pane on the left-hand side I showed you. If you click on one of the fields in our result set, that shows you a graphical histogram. So you don't need to open the graphical mode, but you can still see a graphical representation of each results attribute. So here they've clicked on, yeah. So we've included the fields to include action upload and active process image name with an alias of process. And the left-hand side fields selection. We clicked on process. We can see the different process names, their counts, and their percentages. Filter event type equals enum network, and the action uploads greater than 0, and the fields to include. If you'd like to include graphical options, again, you can manually change the graph settings using the chart editor settings. Again, choose, you know, depending on the pie, this is not going to help you. You want a pie, you're not going to have an X and a Y axis, yeah? So something like a graph, like I showed you, yeah, what's going to be your X axis, what's going to be your Y axis? So on the X axis, we'll have all the different process names. And then on the Y axis, we'll see the counts. 1 count, 3 counts, 5 counts. Yeah. Yeah, so here's an example of that. Here we have a query which includes a stage IP lock, action remote IP, and lock country with an alias of country, and the fields stage for country and a comp stage of count with an alias of count by country. So they're now choosing on the x-axis count by country. Sorry, on the x-axis, it's the countries. Yeah, no, they got that wrong, right? No, that's correct. On the x-axis, we have the countries, correct? Yeah, Australia, France, Singapore. And on the y-axis, we have the counts. So again, you can interact with it if you need to. You can also include within the SQL query options to choose the way to format the graphical view. So we have a different stage called view graph. The view graph stage lets you choose the type of display to use, the header to add to it. So header equals active process counts, show callouts equals true, and what to use as the x-axis, what to use as the y-axis. Also options within the query to use the view highlight stage. The view highlight stage will let you choose which strings you'd like to highlight, which values you'd like to highlight. So view highlight fields equals process values equals Chrome and Explorer. So in our results set, we will highlight for you automatically Chrome and Explorer. All right. So basic queries, very basic. Yeah, just an overview of SQL. I'll give you time to test it. It's a very good lab. I didn't demonstrate all of it. Don't worry, I'll let you go before 5. I'm going to give you probably till about another half an hour to play with this lab and have a short break if you finish it. And then we'll do the last short module together. Yeah. Around 4 o'clock, just after 4. 5 past 4, we'll start the last module. Call out if you need help. Yeah, and you can use other people's queries too. Have a look at their results. I'll go quiet for you and see you back in about half an hour. Yeah, if you haven't used it before, it's a nice short lab to navigate using the SQL search pages, create a couple of queries, and then different ways of visualizing the results, tabular and graphical. Okay, everyone, let's do the last short module in 12 minutes. Yeah, 10 past 4 o'clock. That'll give us lots of time to get through it and give you time to do the lab if you want, and still talk about what you can do to prepare for your PCDRA exam now that you've been through the 5 days, 260 and 262, both Cortex XDR classes. So see you back in 12 minutes. We'll do the course wrap up. Okay, welcome back, everyone. The last module, we made it. Yeah, it's a short one, but very important. Because for most of the class, and EDU 260 as well, we've only talked about the use of Cortex XDR when we're receiving the alerts from our agents and from within Cortex XDR itself. We saw IOCs, BIOCs. I forgot to show you, by the way. I meant to show you before. With our BIOC rules, besides that, because we turned on the analytics engine, we have a whole set of different analytics BIOC rules. Yeah. So these are the rules used by the analytics engine, so that if it matches activity, it will create analytics BIOC alerts for us. So you can find those over here as well. Yeah, you can't delete them. You can disable if you need to, but a whole series of dynamic rules provided to your tenant, the analytics BIOC rules, because we have the analytics engine turned on. Yeah. Okay. So the last part is really to understand a little bit more about how we use Cortex XDR to collect external alerts and logs from external sources, external to XDR. So we'll understand external data collection, the dataset management options we have through the management console, and how you can take in, or how we can take in external alerts by the Cortex XDR API. So anything that can't integrate with us natively, as long as it can send us the alerts using our API, we'll show you how to do that. Okay, so during or by the end of this module, you'll be able to describe Cortex XDR has internal and external data collection, describe the Cortex XDR datasets, know where to manage the datasets in the management console, and how you can send external alerts to Cortex XDR using the XDR API. All right. So first up, understanding our options for external data collection. Here we have the cloud components of Cortex XDR and others, some cloud providers. And here we have some on-prem components. So I've got my Cortex XDR instance in the cloud. We also have our Cortex Data Lake instance, which is paired to XDR. And there's a Cortex Data Lake collector that we can use to collect information from the data lake. That's part of XDR. Here are cloud providers. We saw some of the benefits of taking in logs from our cloud providers. We can provide you with an inventory of, storage and instances and VPCs that have been created, deleted in your environment. So that's about cloud kind of integration options we have. And on-prem, we have our broker VM deployed. Anything that can send syslogs, we can configure to send syslog to the broker VM. So an on-prem firewall, a third-party firewall, we would configure it to send syslogs to broker VM, any syslog in common event format or log extended event format. The broker VM then sends the syslog to the Cortex Data Lake so that our XDR can then analyze it. And we have other applications or applets on our broker VM as well. So other apps to be able to collect the information from CSVs, from relational databases. We have an FTP collector as well. And we can also collect endpoint logs from your endpoints, Windows event logs, for example. So a lot of the external integrations, you have to control them. You have to configure them. Yeah, and we do that through our collection integrations. I'll show you where to find it. So based on, here we go, XDR collectors and, no, I lie, collection integrations down the bottom here under data collection. We have custom collectors, FileBeat and HTTP to collect HTTP logs, to ingest logs from Elasticsearch FileBeat. So they're custom collectors. And then the normal collection integrations, if you need to collect logs from one of our Palo Alto Networks next generation firewalls, we show you the process to go about adding the instance. Yeah. Give you a bit of a process. It'll take some time, so I won't wait for that to load. Same thing with Prisma Access for third-party integration, because they're both Palo Alto Networks. Third-party, Okta, Ping1 to get authentication logs from Ping1. Azure, there are different Azure integration options. Flow logs from Azure's Network Watcher or from Azure's Event Hub and others from GCP. Windows DHCP server logs using the Elasticsearch FileBeat. That's configured up here. That's a custom collector. And many others. I won't go through the whole list. Yeah, Amazon CloudWatch, ServiceNow, Prisma Cloud, and others. Google Workspace, Dropbox. So we can maximize the visibility into what's happening in your environment by also ingesting the logs from your other cloud providers and yeah, SaaS providers. Now, when we take in the logs from an external source, sometimes the log data that they present is not in a format that we recognize the actual field name, for example. So we have parsing rules. They're part of the XDR data ingestion flow. They're part of a parsing rule engine, so that when we receive an incoming log in the raw format, it applies logic to that log to normalize it. And that way we can return results into our result set, into the data set. So the parsing rules tag the data that is required and remove irrelevant parts of the incoming raw log. And that also benefits us by saving storage and increases also the performance of when we do SQL queries. We're not storing data that we can't do anything with in the Cortex Data Lake. So going back to our Cortex Data Lake, we have to also discuss dataset management. So we've already talked a bit about how there are different datasets in our Cortex Data Lake. So XDR stores logs in different datasets. When we did our SQL searches with SQL, you get to choose the datasets to include. And the different datasets are subject to data retention policies. The dataset management under settings, configurations, go into data management, and it pops open for you the interface that shows you all of our datasets. Is it your default? If you make something your default dataset, this is the default for everyone by default. But if you change the default dataset, you don't need to include the dataset stage in a query. We see the type of dataset and a hot range, and now a cold range as well. So now Palo Alto Networks provides two different storage types, hot and cold. There's two different dataset types, system and user, a couple of others as well, yeah. Lookup and raw, you can see. But there's two different types of storage. So for example, I've mentioned to you before that the agents send their alerts and logs into the XDR data set and also Palo Alto Networks next-gen firewalls. And we store the logs for 30 days. That's in a hot range for 30 days. We store the alerts and incident data for 180 days, and that's still considered to be hot. Yeah. But if you purchase a retention add-on license, because maybe the customer needs to have their log data for 6 months, they need to keep their alert and incident data for 1 year, for example. Yeah, you can have different retention add-ons. And that's what provides you with the cold range, the cold storage. Once the data expires from hot storage, it goes into cold storage. And we can't search on as many attributes once it goes into cold range, but it's still searchable. So we have different dataset types. A system dataset is created by XDR, like XDR_data. There are raw datasets that get stored without further processing. They don't, the data that goes into them don't get processed by our parsing rules. We have correlation datasets created by correlation rules, and then user datasets. When you build a query and use target as the last stage, the result is a user dataset. So very important for your customers, yeah? Now, instructors are not the best people to ask about this. For your customers that need different retention requirements, yeah, healthcare is different from financial services, for example. Yeah, remember that for all of our XDR licenses, we are providing a period-based retention, again, 30 days for all ingested data types, logs and alerts, yeah? And 180 days for your alerts and incidents. And if it's a stitched alert, yes, it's 180 days. We keep that detail for you. Yeah. So to provide for longer term storage, we have two different types of storage with additional SKUs. Yeah, you have to buy retention add-ons. Hot storage is fully searchable storage. And that was the original type before we provided cold storage. Cold storage is cheaper. It's used for long-term compliance. And again, the data in cold storage is searchable, but with more limited search capabilities. So if we go back into our data set management, you'll actually see a summary based on our licenses of what we have at the top of the data set summary. So it's building that, calculating what's going on. A bit slow today. Really not usually that slow. Compute unit usage. Yeah, compute units. Compute units are used to run queries. Queries can be submitted from the management console or by API. And we support thousands of compute units. Oh, you have 6 daily compute units, 6 free. Yeah. And compute units let you perform many, many queries, but some customers need to purchase additional compute units. They have to run so many queries. So that shows us compute unit usage. You know, they might be sending so many by API. So yeah, that's what's normal data set management. We see here what I was trying to show you, the hot storage license. I've got my Pro per gigabyte license and my endpoint protection license. So Pro per gigabyte and endpoint protection, hot retention 30 days. And for the alert and incident data, 180 days. So I haven't got any retention add-ons. We see on the data sets the total days stored, the hot range, if you have a cold range, and the utilization, and also the average daily size as well. Total number of events in each data set too. Average event sizes. So you don't really interact too much from here. You can view the schema. Yeah. But it's to show your data set information. Okay. Now, not everyone needs to be able to manage data sets. Yeah. If you right-click on a data set with your powers instance administrator, there are different options depending on the data set type. Yeah. So if the data set's a system data set, you have the option view schema and set as default. If it's a user or raw data set, you also get to do a delete. You can't do a delete of a system data set. Also for lookup, you get delete and also the download option. So you can download it. You can also import a lookup data set. So the file in CSV or TSV or JSON, maximum 30 meg, you can import and define the dataset name to import it to. We have role-based access control. So if you do want to provide access to for a given role, this is one of our custom roles, and you want to provide access for dataset management, it is disabled by default. So it's something you must turn on for a role. Yeah, you have to go into the dataset tab and enable dataset access management. You can then choose which datasets they then have access to and what their access will be. All right, and the very last thing is, if we can't take in the log, for example, or alert from an external alert source using one of our normal methods like syslog or one of the collectors, the other collectors on the broker VM, then we have the ability to accept the alert if it's sent to us using our Cortex XDR API. So why should we think about taking in external alerts? You can see in the alerts table, for example, we have an alert from a checkpoint gateway, VPN device. Here's the alert name and alert description logically, yeah? Another alert coming from a Palo Alto Networks next generation firewall. Other alerts from XDR agent and Cortex XDR, the rest of them. So why is it beneficial to also receive external alerts? It adds much broader context to our incidents. An easier way, if the sender can send a syslog, is to use our broker VM and the syslog collector. That's very simple, but it requires that you have the Pro per gigabyte or Pro per terabyte license. Yeah. Also, if you want to send us the alert using our API. So when we receive an external alert, they're not processed differently. we show you the alerts table, and also we can stitch the alert with relevant EED or other logs that come from our agents or other sources. So we still have full log stitching capabilities for external alerts. So if you want to send alerts using the XDR API, there's a couple of steps involved. You first of all have to use the XDR management console to generate an API key. This API key, by default, will be on an advanced security level. It's hashed with a nonce and a timestamp. You can define the role, the permission for this API key. You probably don't need instance administrator. Yeah. Give it a comment and then save. When you save the API key, it then pops up the generated key for you, but this is the only time we see the key value. Yeah, this key will not be accessible once you close this window. So to be able to send us an alert using our API and this key, you need to copy out the key value. So we show you that key once, copy it. We also will need to know the key ID number. The key ID number will be hiding back here in the column. So key ID number 1, which will have this value. If we generate another new key, we'll have key ID 2, and then another key value. So first generate the key. Then we need to prepare on the source the data in the right format to send it to us using our API. So on the source that needs to send us the alert, we prepare these attributes in JSON. Now, an alert needs to have, at the very least, a timestamp, a severity, and an alert name. That's the minimum requirement for an alert in Cortex XDR, but they can have other attributes as well. Alert description, in this case, local IP import, remote IP import, vendor, product, other attributes, but we have to have a timestamp, severity, and the alert name. Yeah, that's the minimum. So prepare whatever details need to be sent. And then how do we send it to our Cortex instance? You'll either use Python or curl. So here's the URL, https://API whatever your relative domain name is. Yeah, so for us, api-cortex1.xdr.us.paloaltonetworks.com. Just API dash. It's already registered in DNS. The API name to use is /public API /v1 alerts, and then /insert past alerts / and the content to include will be your key value, the key ID, and the alert data in JSON to send using Python or curl. And we'll see the alerts coming in the alerts table. If we find the alert in the alert table, you'd like to right-click on it, alt right-click. You can still do a debug alert to see the alert attributes. Not the best example for the new slide. So look, it's probably the last resort. If you have another way of getting the login to us, something like Syslog, for example, or a source that we natively integrate with, a third party, or of course, Palo Alto Networks, it's always easier, but we can take in the alert using our API as well. So if you want to do a lab and test that, that's what the last lab does, to send an alert using our Cortex XDR API. It does work. I'll leave you about half an hour for it. So now at the end of this is really the last part of the class, yeah? You can now describe our internal and external data collection, the different external data collection methods, like using a syslog collector, using our API, the other collectors on the broker VM, describe our different data sets, know where to manage them in the management console, and know the basics of sending alerts to us using our API, and you can test that in the lab if you want. So that is the very last part of the learning for the class. Yeah, there is a last lab. Again, I'll give you time for it, but before you do, or before you say goodbye, it's 4:30 on a Friday in Singapore, probably later where some of you are as well. So what I'm going to do briefly is just say, if you are going to prepare for your PCDRA certification, now that you've sat EDU 260 and 262, please go to Beacon. The other reason you need to go to Beacon, thank you for those of you that completed the survey. If you haven't yet completed the survey, please do that now, yeah, while you're still here with me. I can check, yeah. But besides that, on Beacon, we then have all the resources we need for preparing for our PCDRA certification exam with Pearson VUE. It's a very valuable certification. Add to your Palo Alto Network certification list and others. And the best recommendation I have for you is we have lots of study resources here for PCDRA. There's the exam blueprint you should look at. There's the exam data, the PCDRA DRA data sheet. But most importantly, I think, is the study guides. We have digital reviews as well, yeah? How would we use XDR to respond to attacks? Get started with endpoint protection, creating agent installation packages, so you can review certain content from here, but you won't need to. But this is the most important, the study guides. I think some of you I showed you on Monday. Those that didn't see it, it's a PDF, free, 130 pages, yeah? And lots of great detail that I do recommend. Don't read it from front to back necessarily, but go through it. Yeah, it's very interesting. There's also review questions at the end of every section, multiple choice questions, similar to what you'll get in the exam. If you want a practice exam, we have a practice exam here as well. Yeah, so that's the study guide. But for PCDRA, we also have the practice exam somewhere as well. Exam practice questions. Yeah, so this is not the official exam, but before you sit the exam, very good idea. I would do the EDU 260 exam practice questions and the EDU 262. We have separate exam practice questions and then the big combined PCDRA exam practice questions. So that's my recommendation if you want to go through and book in the exam with Pearson VUE. Do it from home, do it from one of their offices, but it's a very valuable certification. Cortex XDR is more and more being deployed. Very popular solution. So on that note, I will say thank you for your attendance. Yeah, in case you do want to drop off early, if you want to do the lab will be available to you through tomorrow, not all of Sunday. So if you do want to finish any labs, the lab will be available for you through tomorrow as well. I won't be here to help, yeah. But it's been my pleasure to have you. I hope you've learned a lot during the class. For those of you from Monday, for the whole week, and for those of you who recently joined yesterday, I hope you've enjoyed the analysis and response. See how we perform causality analysis, how we use the advanced response. Yeah. So no rush, yeah. I'll leave you in case you want to spend time going through the labs, but yeah, please do make sure you have found the event for us and you've completed you want to download your course attendance certificate as well, right? So you'll go through events, my events. It's probably going to be completed for you because I marked you as passed already. So maybe you need to look at completed and then you'll go into it and use the option for the survey, download your certificate. Thomas, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Great. Yeah. And, it is 4:30 on a Friday. If anyone does want to, drop off, that's okay. Completely understand. Yeah. Thank you, Jackson. Good to have you back again. I hope to meet you all again in the future. Yeah, come back for another EPT class with us. Yeah, firewalls, EDU 210, Panorama, troubleshooting, Prisma Access, EDU 318. Yeah. So, Palo Alto Networks are wonderful. They provide us partners with the ability to attend this kind of partner training. Take advantage of it. I hope it's been good for you. Yeah. So I'll be quiet. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Jackson. No. Yeah. Yeah, that would be a special lab team request. So Philip, you would have to contact. I don't think that's possible. Yeah, not really possible. Yeah, because they have to reprovision. I don't think so. Let me send a reply to you. All right. And then, new messages coming through. Thank you, Gordon. Awesome. Yeah. Oh. People are sending messages. Yeah. Ah, yeah. Sean, thank you. Yeah. Anyway, take your time. Yeah. No rush. I'm here until the last people leave, until after 5 o'clock sometime when I think you're not there anymore. Yeah. I'll call out before I drop the session. Thank you very much. So yeah, if you're still having a personal conversation with me in the chat, keep on talking. Because I can do that, I think. Second. Okay. But yeah, the lab numbers. Oh, I missed them. Sorry, a bit embarrassing. Yeah, if you want to find the lab, it's the last lab. You know which lab to do now. I won't even bother putting the slide up again. But you can't sit there seeing my Spider-Man, that's for sure. Ah, hmm. Thomas, thank you very much. Hope you also have a wonderful weekend. I'm actually going to be on holidays after this. This is my last day of work for the year. Yeah, most organizations in Australia also they closed down it's going to be Christmas here on Sunday everywhere. Yeah, Christmas to New Year's, so very quiet period. Public holidays in Australia for Monday and Tuesday also. So we have a very short week next week. I'll be on holidays. I hope you're all well. Enjoy time with your families through the New Year's. Get to see some nice fireworks. Yeah, be safe, everyone. Good to meet you. Yeah, it is. It is. That's right. Thank you very much, Thomas. Very kind. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Some neighbors who've got their Christmas trees up, some decorations at the front of their homes. Quite pretty this time of year. Yeah, I always like this season. Thank you, Jackson. Merry Christmas to you and the family. Hope you have a good break if you're having one. See you next time. Yeah. Okay. Bye. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much for your lovely message. Merry Christmas to you too. Okay, bye.